Welcome, everyone, to the Talent Revolution Tales from the Trenches. I'm your co host, Joe Shambaum.
And I'm Jill Caniglio-Kirk. Today, I'm really excited about the topic we're going to cover. We have a special guest with us that Joe's going to introduce, but today our topic is really talking about company values and how important they are to shaping the whole employee journey with your organization.
We have a special guest, Wendy Sellers. She's known as the HR lady, and I'm doing the quotes because it's truly quoted and trademarked. But she's not your typical HR professional. She's bold, unapologetic, and laser focused on driving results that impact the bottom line. Famous for her nonsense mantra, suck it up, buttercup, which I love the quote and the book, Wendy shifted her message from calling out ineffective employees to exposing and transforming ineffective leaders. With over 25 years of experience, she brings a refreshing mix of honesty, humor, and hard-earned wisdom to help organizations build strong leaders, boost productivity, and create workplaces where people actually want to work. So welcome to the show, Wendy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
Wendy, it's so exciting to have you. Honestly, when I looked at your profile and your background, I thought, what a breath of fresh air. You know who you are, you know what's important. And again, I love the unapologetically, right?
Thank you.
So I know passion is really kind of a part of who you are. And I'm really excited because this topic resonates with me as an HR leader. And I think values is something that sometimes is used as a paintbrush, right? And it's something we plaster on the walls, and it's something that marketing teams latch on to. But I also understand that those are things that need to have life and some substance behind them. So I would love to take some time here to delve into how do you take your company values and how do you connect them to the daily behaviors in an organization and use them kind of to drive behavior?
Sure. Well, you kind of already talked about it is, don't just leave it in the marketing department, right? So many times company values or whatever you call them, but they're usually related to mission, vision, and values. Sometimes company calls them something else, but they're usually created in the marketing department, in the sales department, in the business development department, so that we could connect with customers and people that are going to pay us for our goods, right? But we then forget to say, no, we're supposed to hold our employees accountable for this as well. And it's just a great way to take those values off the wall or off the website that nobody's looking at them on and put them into your job descriptions. So I'm an HR consultant. Most of my clients are too small to have HR. So I teach people there, several people, how to be HR, and they're calling me when things hit the fan, right? And guess what? It's not usually something good. They're not like, hey, let's check in with Wendy, the HR lady. Things are going great. They're usually like, I have a problem employee and I don't know what to do. And 99% of the times I send my client back to look at the company values. Everybody's expected to comply with them. They usually have words like respect and professionalism, maybe transparency, integrity. They're usually positive words of rules of engagement. But then we forget and we sit there, scratch our head, like, how do we hold our employee accountable to this? It's like, well, first of all, you got to train them what the heck those words mean. Not everybody's going to know the same words. And then you need to hold everybody accountable, up to and including your customers too. And once our employees see us holding the customers accountable, that's when they're going to go, oh boy, I'm next. Does that make sense?
100%. I mean, from my side, I think about that and go, all right, it's such an important part of what I do as an HR person. But how do you then, if you don't see the behaviors kind of and the values being lived in the company, how do you really drive things in the right direction, right? I think there's often people that say, oh, I see misalignment here. I see practices that don't align. And that's where things get kind of awkward and uncomfortable, right?
Right.
And then a lot of people kind of probably put the brakes on and say, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for somebody who might be experiencing that in their organization?
Sure. So number one thing is just jamming your company values into your job descriptions, which will then roll over into your interview questions and then hopefully your performance review interactions as well. But just jamming them in there doesn't mean it's going to magically happen, because people can lie during interviews. They can lie, sugarcoat things during feedback sessions. But the minute we say no, bad person over here is out. They can no longer work with our company. Everybody else in the company goes, oh, they were serious about that. They want me to not act a fool. They want me to be respectful, showing that transparency and professionalism. So it's holding people accountable. And I have some statistics for you. One is from PwC, and this is 2023, but 87% of employees said they would consider leaving a company that does not align with their personal values. So why don't we figure it out up front, like in the interview process, in the job ad that has all this information about the job itself and the way we act and interact in this company. And then, of course, the amazing benefits that we have too, right? But another review or a study from Harvard Business Review said that companies with strong shared values see up to 12 times higher employee engagement. We're all sitting here all the time going, how the heck do we engage our employees? How can I increase it? And boom, you probably already have it written somewhere, in your handbook, which nobody reads. I write them. I know nobody reads them. They're the most boring document in the world. So if you want them to be really read, they have to be talked about in a regular basis, from reviews to interviews, promotions, or the opposite, you're not getting the promotion because you often act a fool. And by the way, if you do it one more time, you're not going to have a job here anywhere. So it's really, just not being vague and being very specific and making it part of the company culture, but also part of leadership's actions as well.
So if you're putting it into the job description and people don't read the job descriptions that we know as well, so how do you suggest that, whether it's the recruiter, maybe the hiring leader, or the HR person in those interviews, how do you get that instilled into the right questions or the right outcomes? Because the manager's usually always focused on the technical piece, not everything else.
Exactly. So thank you for asking that. I like to create a scorecard. And honestly, folks, if you go to my website, thehrlady.com, you can get it for free. Go to downloads and it'll send you to this giant Google Drive folder where you can take everything that's in there. But I literally have created a scorecard based off of job descriptions. It's just an Excel sheet. So every single line item in the job description has to be completed by the end of the interview. And then I use that same exact format for feedback, whether it's performance feedback, behavior feedback, quarterly, yearly, biannual, whatever it is. But if you're always sticking to every single line item that's in the job description as an interviewing manager, HR, hiring manager, technical person, you have no choice but to ask these questions that have been pre-vetted. And the great thing is, Joe, that you can use the same interviewing questions for every single role in the company when it's related to the values. So you really only have to create them once. And then we have this wonderful thing called AI that can help you create interview questions out of a job description. You just somebody has to hold everybody in their interview process and then the review process too, accountable for actually finishing the entire feedback session, the entire interview, and not just going, oh, I'm just going to ask about the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Does that make sense?
It does, but like everyone says, well, I don't have time for that. And, there's no time for those questions. And, we've already spent an hour. So how do you how do you hold them accountable, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if it's a manager and it's a hiring manager that is saying, I don't have time to ask for these questions, then fine, get the recruiter to ask that part of the question, pawn it off onto somebody else. But if you still have hired that person as the hiring manager and now they're a problem, well, egg's on your face and you need to hold that person accountable. No manager, you chose this person, you chose to keep them, you chose to keep promoting them, even though they act a fool and violate our company values. So we're going to hold you accountable up to and including termination. That's when people go, whoa, they're serious about this. I'm going to step back here for a second and I'm going to actually pay attention to what they want me to do.
So do you put that into like a interview training guide or like for hiring leaders? Okay.
Yeah,
for all
absolutely.
levels then too, right? You gotta
All
get the
levels.
top executives on board.
Everything, everybody. I mean, well, let's talk about the top executives without any naming any names. I mean, we've all worked for somebody that we wish we never had to work for in our life, and we wish nobody else in there has to work for. But when you are letting leaders get away with not acting like the company values are saying, it's telling the rest of the company, well, it's okay that I act like a fool. Or it's also telling the rest of the company, they sold me a bill of goods and I'm going to take their paycheck. I'm going to be very, very low engagement, if any engagement. Maybe I'm going to do the bare minimum of my job, but I am going to have one foot out the door. So when your competitor comes calling, the employees go out. So if you're okay with spending all this money, and boy, is it expensive recruiting these days, but if you're okay with the turnover and everything, then fine, let your leaders act like a fool too. But we can't hold our frontline and people accountable and not our leaders. The frontline people will say this is not fair and they're going to check out and leave, or worse, check out and stay.
Right.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about here is really, to me, like you're kind of saying this has to really be the backbone of your not only HR team's approach, but your business lens that you're looking at your whole kind of value chain and your whole organization through, or otherwise it somehow falls apart. And when you were talking a little bit about some of the steps you've gone through, it really made me think about how you reward people.
Yep.
Really matters, right? So you have to really make sure all of your processes are congruent and in alignment with these values, because if you're rewarding, the what and not the how, and you're very focused on outcomes rather than, behaviors and values and things like that, and things are out of alignment there, then like you said, kind of the house of cards starts tumbling down, right?
It really does. And you have to translate your values into real life, interactive Q&A. Like, hey, if you had this situation and you're assistant manager or you're a project manager or you're not even a manager, what would you do? And then we have to actually shut up and listen to the candidate or the internal candidate if you're promoting from within. And that's what we typically don't do. And Joe even mentioned it too. Well, what if we only have an hour? If you're only taking an hour to hire your next piece of talent, you're already, wishing for a star, right? Because it is very, very time consuming. Maybe one interview looks like an hour, but the full process should take much longer, and we should be getting other opinions involved as well. I'm very, very big on committees, and I like to have an interviewing committee. Now, maybe they're not all involved in 8 hours of the process, but these two people are doing the pre-screening. These two people are doing maybe a phone call. Then the next set of people are doing, the in-person interview. But we're getting a scorecard back from everybody who's going to be forced to work with this person.
Well, it sounds like a structured interview process, right,
Yeah,
Wendy?
very structured.
And then each function and area can then keep going through it, but it consistently, there's a structure.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we don't have time for all that, but it does get easier if you start the structure, out and you just keep holding people accountable, saying, no, you can't go to phase 2 or phase 3, or yes, we could fast track the best candidate there, but you still have to follow these scorecards. I hate to say it, but the only time people really go, okay, now I know why this is important, is if they get sued,
Right.
and then they're like, oh, this is why. Like, no, we're here to prevent you from being sued. But more important than prevention for being sued, we're here to help you hire the best candidate, keep them engaged, be productive, and ta-da, everybody goes home happy. And, our clients and customers are happy too.
Yeah, I think you're highlighting these examples and these situational questions in interviews is really spot on with really how do you dial into a person who's got a rehearsed answer versus how do they really think, what's innate in them, what are their innate ways of approaching problem solving or other things. So I think that's really a valuable way to really make sure you're not just kind of hearing them tell you what you want to hear and really kind of digging into who they are and what makes them tick.
Right.
So,
Well, like I said before, we have this wonderful thing called AI now that can help us create job interview questions for any position in the world, even if we don't even understand the terminology. And candidates have that same opportunity, so they can prepare now. So while it's a win-win for everybody, it makes the candidates be able to be prepared, which is good for them. But we need to have our stuff together. If we're sitting there going, I don't know, all 3 candidates answered the same way. Well, do you have a scoring system that you can rate them? And what about their behavior? And then here's another thing. I don't know, are you doing references and asking behavioral questions? Yeah. If you're not doing that, how are you going to find out they left because they were acting a fool versus they left because they didn't have the knowledge, skills, and ability? So asking those right questions about why somebody left an organization is also very important. But we're always rushing through that too.
Right. Yeah, I am intrigued by your book. I want to talk a little bit about that and hear about maybe what inspired that. And then I think one of the concepts our listeners would really like to hear about from your book is your values committee concept. Could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So I have two books, and my second book, which is about how to deal with crappy leaders and jerks at work. That's the PC version subtitle there. I really wanted to teach people how to create committees specifically based on values, what we're just talking about. We tend to put people in, oh, this is a big decision. We're going to create a set of values, or we're going to brush off our values and make them, worthy for 2026 and beyond. And we usually just put executives in there. Well, I'm sorry, executives don't always know what's going on in the front line. That's not their responsibility.
What? Wendy, come on. What?
They don't. They don't. And, even when I was an executive of a larger company, I would say the same thing. I thought I knew what was going on based off of a survey or something over here. But the employees that are on the front line, manager or not, they usually know what's going on. So when you ask them, hey, we're going to change a policy, in this case, a set of behavioral standards, and we want you to join a committee. Don't worry, it's going to be short term, but we value you. They go, whoa, okay. First of all, they're back to being engaged. If you actually take their information, if you're just doing it because I told you so, they're going to figure that out too. And they're going to be even madder that you put them on a committee that you're not listening to them. But we really just have to, we spend all this time and money trying to do employee surveys and, figure out, are they engaged? Are they staying 1 foot in, 1 foot out? But the important things like how we expect employees to behave in our workplace, we forget to ask the employees, how do you think this is fair? And some of them may not even understand some of your values words. I see so many companies with the words, they're aimed towards customers and clients. They're not at all aimed towards employees. So employees are like, well, they're not for me. I'll just ignore that. So the committees, I think it just helps you get a little bit more of a cross section of your culture, get some honest feedback, as long as we're letting them say what they need to say without negatively holding them accountable. It also helps call out some Hippocratic oaths, right? And keeping leaders honest. If your company's not there, then committees aren't for you.
Yeah, I love this idea because I think it gives everybody we're all on the same level in this room, no matter what seat we hold, what level we hold in the company. We all have a voice and we all bring a different perspective. So I really think it's a great suggestion, and that a lot of other companies should really consider getting that perspective. To your point, I'm guessing companies out there have done all those things and then said, yep, we didn't like what they came up with. So then we went and did something else, which you're going to have a lot more damage control to do.
Absolutely. We either want your opinion, and so that, ownership breeds accountability too. We either want your opinion and we're going to use it, or we're just doing this because, the HR lady told us to, and we're not going to use it. Nobody's ever going to want to be on that committee again, whether it's the holiday planning committee or the company values committee, or something like that. But it's important to get our employees' feedback.
Yeah, and I think that buy-in is achieved if you do it right. And then you have these ambassadors that are kind of spokespersons and people that kind of model and try to, kind of be the solid citizens, hold other people accountable, right? It's really genius. How can we spread this movement, right? And have more than one person carrying this, momentum through the company. So, yeah, love that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's we're asking for the opinions and the feedback from the employees, but are we actually then doing anything with it? I know there's the surveys and the different aspects of it, but showcase, if they're calling out other leaders of not doing those values and holding there, whether it's in the interview process or later on, that's when you're going to have employee engagement as well, when the actually voice matters. So it's a huge thing.
It really is, and it's also about being specific. A lot of the common mistakes that I see companies make when they're creating values, whether they use a committee or not, is they make them too generic. They just have one word: integrity, excellence, teamwork. Okay, well, what does that mean specifically to this company? What behaviors get rewarded around here, even when they shouldn't? What makes someone a hero or a headache in this company? If we had to fire someone for violating a value, which value would that be? And can we, think about, if we go to court, can we prove that they violated this, or was it just hearsay? So we need to make sure that we're revealing, our real values, not just the ones that marketing wants us. No offense, marketing, but we need, our customers and our employees to be equally held accountable. And that's the other thing, one of the common mistakes companies make just when dealing with values is they let their customers act a fool, but hold their employees accountable. When an employee sees, a jerk of a customer being held accountable, they go, yeah, my company's got my back, versus my company only cares about money and I got 2 feet out the door now, and I'll keep taking your paycheck until I find another one.
So how do you measure values?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think it comes down to, again, about like a scorecard. It doesn't need to be complicated. Thumbs up, you're doing a good job at behaving with our values, or thumbs down, you're not. It could be A, B, C, D, E, all the way up to 100%. But it's really like, I like the yes or the no. You're either behaving accordingly and you could therefore continue to work here, or for the customer, continue being our customer. We're going to send you to a training to fix that. And if you still can't act the way we need you to, then you can't be in this company. End of story. So just being very specific. If you do have words like respect, professionalism, integrity, really should also have somewhere in your handbook, maybe on the job descriptions, what they really mean. It should be a full sentence.
Right.
I'm fine with just having the one words on the wall, but they really should be, this is what this means. And if employees aren't getting it, then we need to do a training on it. And maybe we need to simplify it and make it a little bit simpler, the terminology.
Yeah, I think those definitions are a very, very important piece of this that some companies are missing, and that alignment on those definitions is really what gives you the ability to layer these things into the job descriptions, into your feedback tools, right, into your reward programs. And I actually facilitated a workshop around this in a small startup I worked with. And it was a very small startup. So we got every employee involved in it. And it was a bit of a nightmare when you actually start negotiating every word that goes in the definition that goes with the value. But I'll say at the end of it, you end up in a place where it really represents what you want your company to be. And sometimes it's aspirational depending on where you're at in your journey as a business, right?
Yeah.
So that was more of a, here's, we kind of just are forming, where do we want to be? Where do we want this to carry us? But I would just say I could recognize just through the work that I did in that startup, taking those and embedding those and building out all the HR processes, those definitions and every word in them were highly scrutinized and very important to me in making sure that we built this holistic framework for HR that really, set us up for success. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to take the time in the beginning. And even if you're, 5 years into your business right now and you're thinking, oh, I didn't really do that. Well, okay, that's okay. Admit it and start over and say, we've changed. And without getting into the mission and vision, because that's more like sales and marketing, but I would also say looking at that every couple of years, especially if you're a startup, like, okay, does our mission and our vision need to morph? Because if our employees are rolling their eyes on it, our customers might be too. But there's a study from McKinsey from 2023, and it said that 70% of culture change efforts fail because values are too vague or inconsistent with leadership behavior. No, we've never seen that, right, folks?
Yeah, and things mean different things to different people. So how do we really hammer that out in a way that's very quantifiable, that we can all make sure that whether we're a global business, it really means the same thing to all of us. So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So how do you do it in a smaller company? You're close knit, you're there, there's more probably more communication in there, but some of the listeners will be in large companies, and sometimes, people get into a corner or they're small, how do you ensure that those values are getting across, whether it's a 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 size company, how do those stay prominent in larger companies as well?
Again, yeah, we kind of already touched on that, but just having like very specific standardized practices when you're doing job postings, when you're doing job interviews. And then once you have somebody, let's just say that's their 30, 60, 90-day orientation period, make sure you're letting them know, hey, good job. You're acting the way we want you to do. We still need you to train a little bit more on our knowledge, skills, and abilities over here. But your values and the way you're behaving, even when you're frustrating, we appreciate that. Or, hey, maybe not. I got to check you over here. And so, candidates these days are very expensive to obtain. So we should make sure that we're letting them know before they go and accept that job offer, this is what you're being held accountable for, so they don't walk out later and we've wasted all that money. And then, of course, there's going to be reviews out there on our brand too. So job postings, LinkedIn Talent Trends 2024 said that job postings that mention culture in general, but more specifically some type of behavior attributes such as values, get 67% more qualified applicants. And so that's just really just dusting off your job descriptions, period, even without the behavior part. Are they where they need to be? I'm just going to say in 2026 and moving beyond. And then do we have a mention of our company culture in there, benefits, things like that? That would be in a job posting, not a job description. But so often managers, all they're using is the job description, even if they're winging it, right? Which I hope they wouldn't, but let's face it, that's the reality of the world. They're winging an interview. They're looking at the job description going, yeah, I know this by the back of my hand. I'm going to ask this. But when HR says, well, no, you're going to ask these 5 questions related to values and give us feedback too, then they're going to know you're serious. So it's about us not letting the hiring team get away with anything.
Yeah, and truthfully, you shared some staggering, really impressive statistics about why it makes sense to take the time to do this the right way. And Joe and I dedicated an episode to job descriptions, which I know could be a boring topic, but this is certainly something we wove into that and talking about oftentimes what you miss in the job description, which is kind of your whole starting point for evaluating candidates and holding them, kind of side by side to kind of score them, is this fit piece, right? Yeah. And the fit piece really boils down to, do your values align with what the candidate's values are? Is the work environment going to be a fit for them? Just the daily kind of, if we all bring our natural selves to work every day, we're clearly going to perform our best. When we're trying to conform to a place and a set of values that are out of alignment, it's definitely not going to work. And just personally in my career, I've had a lot more terminations around that fit piece and the value misalignment, rather than kind of the competency fit. I rarely find people that say they can do something and then they can't do it. It's really, it's almost like a 90-10 for me in my 25 plus year career. So I think we can't really emphasize enough how important this topic is. And again, if this doesn't get your CEO's attention with this 12 times more, engagement for employees and other statistics you've shared, I would just say numbers talk. We all know that as HR people, everything has a quantifiable value to the bottom line, and spending some time doing this the right way, I think, is definitely a way to improve your company's results overall.
It is. And I think your job posting is your first test of, we live our culture. It tells your candidates whether you're living your values or you're just renting them. Like if one of your values is transparency, it should be all over your all the job descriptions and all the job postings. And we're obsessed with transparency. If you like to hide mistakes or hoard information, you're gonna hate it here. But then if you don't put the job pay in, you're really being transparent. No, you just had a really good AI session, write that stuff for you, but you're not actually living it. So it takes 2, and you might screw up a little bit, but at least you're trying. And then the last thing I did want to say about that is getting your candidates' feedback, even if you didn't offer them a next round. How was the interviewing process? Not all of them are going to complete it, but the ones that do, how about we actually listen to them? Yeah, some of them might be upset because they didn't get the job, so they're going to give you a bad review, so so to speak. But if we're actually listening to our candidates too, to say, how is the process? And they say, well, you say transparency is important to you, but then you weren't transparent with me, then you can go, oh, egg on our face. We need to fix that.
That also drives the right candidate experience by asking their questions, getting their feedback, good or bad, and drives to the
Yeah.
different pieces.
Yep.
Which there's an episode on candidate experience, and there's also an episode on assimilation plans that Wendy just mentioned about 30, 60, 90 days. So just a little
Right.
plug there. But part of it, Wendy, is we love stories. So is there any type of favorite story that you want to share, whether it's about a company that truly actually hired by values, or maybe the opposite way where it failed but they learned from it, or any intriguing story for the listeners?
Yeah, so this one wasn't so much on a hiring, but the one
Sure.
client that I had, I may have had to, put a fork in them a little bit to make this happen, but they fired a top producer who was also very high on the org chart, who constantly violated their value of respect. And so while it was financially difficult for them and painful, within 6 months, their current employee engagement soared, turnover dropped, voluntary turnover dropped, and productivity went up. Was it drastic? No, but it kept going up. And that's what happens when you protect your culture over your ego. But so I see it so much like, oh, I can't get rid of that person. They're the top producer. I'm like, well, that top producer is like, let's go through your recruiting ads and how much time you spent on just Indeed ads alone. Never mind the entire interviewing team who would take offline to interview people because you have, voluntary turnover because of that jerk over there, that crappy leader, that jerk at work, and you're letting them get away with it. So this one client that I finally got them to see the light, they were like, okay, we get it. And then, what they did after that is they said, you know what, we haven't updated our values in probably 20 years. And they put a committee together. I helped them with that. And then I just backed out after that. They seemed like they were going in the right direction. So I was so proud of them.
It's always great to see people, basically once they overcome that fear and they act, right? How much things fall into place, right? How many, I think a lot of us are captive, to kind of fear and not making indecision, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening today that probably have that person in their organization. They just don't know what to do about it, right? So I would just say, hopefully that inspires someone, if not to fire them, at least to start the process of sending the message to them, having some consequence, right? Having some accountability, coaching, reform, right? Whatever you want to call it. And then if it leads in the behavior change, great. And if it doesn't, then like you said, we got to give people the invitation sometimes so that we can preserve what we're trying to build in the company. So
Exactly.
Great example.
Yeah, I mean, when you hire, you promote, and even unfortunately, when you fire by your company values, you don't need slogans. Your culture becomes your marketing.
Right. Yeah. The less you basically, the less you have to boast it to people, right? And they just kind of experience it, right? The more you can tell that you actually have one, right? And it's forming. So.
And then one more thing I want to say also is, since we were talking about rushing through interviews and everything, if you really want to take all this seriously and you want to take a slow down, I don't want to say slow down, but to be more calculated in your interviews, brag about that too in your interview process. When you interview the first person for a quick phone call or reach out to them, let them know, hey, our process typically takes 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to have 3 interviews. We're going to try to move it along as quick as possible. But just FYI, because some people may say, never mind, peace out. And that's fine, then let them go. But letting them know up front. But if you have all of your stuff together, your values ready, the questions that can be used for everybody regarding the company values, getting all the questions ready for every single job that's open before you post that job ad, it's going to be a lot easier to, go through the interview and the candidates and say yay or nay and move on to the next level of the game.
Right. Yeah, one thing you brought up earlier that just clicking in my mind right now that I've used successfully is when you reference check for an employee. I think it's your last chance to say, have I been duped, right? And we all know the only people people are going to give you names of are people that are going to say wonderful things about them. So one idea I have and one suggestion I have, and I'm sure you've used this one, Wendy, because I think we're soul sisters and we definitely met in a prior life or something like that. But It's basically tell me what 3 attributes you would use to describe this person, right? And you're going to get a lot more around what are their values, what are their behaviors, who are they as a human being, how do they carry themselves.
Yeah.
We all know the accountant can do accounting, right?
Right.
And that XYZ, right? So let's leave that conversation getting some insight that we may not have gotten and use it as a way to kind of validate some of your own intuition and what you've explored during the interview. Because I think that sometimes what you hear there is maybe a little bit different than what you thought you saw, right? So I would just tell people, don't dismiss that. I see so many people thinking that's a waste of time. They pawn it off on a recruiter, right? They say, okay, I'm paying a recruiter. Sorry, Joe. I'm paying a recruiter. Why do I need to go call people? But I would just say many times I heard something in that conversation or asking a question like that made me either pause or validate, right? That this is the fit I'm looking for. And I think we're going to kind of be a good partnership here and be aligned. So
and the recruiter can help you out with that too, absolutely. We just got to make sure the recruiter, especially if they're an external recruiter, knows how important our company values are to us, and this is the process, and we don't want to just hire the smartest person. We want to hire hopefully the smartest person who's also not a jerk.
Right. Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, the recruiter has to not want to just fill the role. They want to actually find the right person with the right values and the right experience, and whether it's internal or external, 100%.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Wendy, any final thoughts, summary around the topic, or where can find your information? Any summary for yourself on the topic and the world that you love?
So, like I said in the beginning of this, I have a book, How to Deal with Crappy Leaders and Jerks at Work. I won't say the rest of the title because it is not PC.
And we are rated G.
Okay, yep. So that's why I glossed over that. It has the word whisperer in it, and we'll leave it at that. But you could find that as well as my first book, Suck It Up, Buttercup, Be a Leader People Will Follow, on my website, thehrlady.com, or you can just go to Amazon as well. And just look for Wendy Sellers and it'll come up. I have it in English and Spanish as well as English audio. I'm an HR consultant. I do a lot of training and speaking around the country. And I'm just telling you, I've been doing this actually for close to 30 years now. And the minute I started really focused on behavior at work, I really was like, oh, I wish I did this 25 years ago, because when people are running to HR, it's usually by that time that the person's behavior is getting out of control and the manager or the team doesn't know what to do. It doesn't mean they don't have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be the accountant or whatever, but nobody wants to work with them. And so before you're tossing them out, have some kind of training plan involved, maybe mentoring, coaching, something like that. And then letting them know, up to and including termination, you have 1 shot or you have 2 shots and that's it. But prevent it when you can by start asking those questions in the interviewing process. And if you need to dust off your values or you don't have any, I really, really encourage you to get a truly diverse committee together, and not just diversity of look, diversity of thought. How long have I been at the company? What is my role? Where am I on the work chart? And then all the other levels of diversity of saying, okay, we want to hear from as many people as possible, and then truly listen and make some changes.
Great advice. I would just say thank you so much for sharing your resources with our audience. I know that they will be very helpful. And I'm sure there's HR people out there or people in organizations out there saying, I really didn't know where to get started with this. And now I feel like I have a good resource and a good place to start. So thank you very much. I know you're very passionate about what you do. And hopefully the outcome of this will lead to getting rid of a lot of jerks in the workplace.
Yes,
absolutely.
If I can help you get rid of a jerk in the workplace, go for it. My book, How to Deal with Crappy Leaders and Jerks at Work, has an outline of what to do with those company values with that committee. So you could kind of start there. And then there's a handout with some homework assignment on the back for holding people accountable that maybe the values didn't help so much.
Right.
Yeah, you have to have the right people and the right values.
Yeah.
So, well, Wendy, it was awesome. I really appreciate you joining us and being here. Jill, did you have any other thoughts
No, like I said, I'm very excited about the spark that this is going to create in a lot of people that I know. So hopefully it gives them the enthusiasm to know that they can go after it. So
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for having me, everybody.
Appreciate
thank you
it.
so much.
Thanks, everyone. Share, like, and listen, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.